So like maybe we're different, right? I went to university and I was thinking like, you know, okay, you do 4 years of college and then you get a job and that's the rest of your life. So like that was definitely the kind of vision I had. Was okay, so I'm like the best at everything in theory in high school, and I'm gonna go and yeah, do Eng Phys because it seems more practical, and then like job, and that is kind of like the game plan. University was weird for me in that like I kind of felt like it was like kind of like summer camp. I don't know if my heart wasn't in it because like I wanted to be a filmmaker, and there I felt like I was in this weird limbo. I was kind of going through the motions, especially in first year. Had a terrible breakup with my high school girlfriend who actually went to Harvard, and it was like everything was a mess. She by the way came third rank in my school, and I was number one. Anyway. So first year I was like going through the motions, not like killing anything, like not getting a grade. But like by second year I was into the engineering physics program, which was really hard, and we were doing like 35 contact hours a week plus like 5 assignments, 6 assignments. I don't know if you guys like get slammed like that in second year, but they basically want to like almost like cull you, and we lose like a third of the class or something in second year, lose a sixth of the class in first year, and like it was brutal. And got to the end of Eng Phys, and I was like, okay, so what do I do? And all these recruiters come to the university, and a lot of them came for consulting companies. So Bain, BCG, Accenture, McKinsey. Like I was interviewing with all of these firms, and nobody wanted me. But I was ranked, like in my class of about 600 engineering students, I was ranked roughly like 12th. So roughly I say, but like exactly 12. And like I think I'm a good interview. I think one thing that you can count on is that like people are not necessarily good judges. Like people can't necessarily spot talent. I mean, that's what I like to tell myself now, but I'll also tell you that like I think that's like, you know, you can back that up. Like, you know, traders in the stock market, if you look at like how is their performance compared to like just buying and holding, like stock traders are actually generally just very bad at their jobs, and yet they think that they're experts and they think they know what's going on, but their performance is not significantly better than chance. And I argue you could make a similar kind of argument for people who are hiring, is that like they try to, you know, find the best candidate and weed them out, but like it's a very hard thing to do, and like maybe they're actually very bad at it. Because frankly, I think I would take any company and make it better, because like that's my mentality, is like I need to get in there and figure out what's wrong, use some strategy and prioritization to sort of bring things up. So yeah, nobody wanted me. There was one company that offered me a job, and they were called Nuclear Safety Solutions. They were located outside of Toronto in a little town, and 30% of Ontario's power actually comes from nuclear. And so there's huge nuclear plants. This company, Nuclear Safety Solutions, basically does everything within a plant, from, you know, figuring out the hydraulics and doing like the fuel replenishment, doing coding to like model the system. And the plan that they would have for you is like a 2-year plan where you do 6 months in each of their departments. And yeah, starting salary was like $50,000 going up to $60,000 after 2 years. And I turned them down and I moved to Australia. So that's basically what happened to me. So I think what you'll find with a lot of people is that like the road is much longer and much windier than you'd expect. I think that was a huge takeaway for me, from like thinking about this really linear process to like, no, it goes all around and around. And I don't think it's just me. I think it was like, you know, all of my friends from college ended up like some went on to do like med school. Some actually did take those consulting jobs. Some did consulting jobs and went for an MBA. Some went to law school. Some, you know, like very few of us in engineering physics became engineers with an interest in physics, or physicists. You know, like there's very few of us. Some went to grad school for science and stuff like. Well, so I went to Australia, and I kind of had this plan to attend a school in Australia called AFTRS, Australian Film, Television, Radio School. And they're actually a place that I emailed back when I finished high school In the year 2000, I emailed them and I was like, yo, I'm finishing high school, I want to, be a filmmaker. And they were like, most of our students are older. But the thing about this film school was that it took like 4 students in each department. So 4 directors, 4 producers, 4 writers, 4 documentarians every year. So very, very like elite. If you can get in, you're basically, hot housed to be like the next great, director, producer, or whatever for Australia, more or less. Like, if you can get in here and like go through this program, you can end up in a really good place. And that's always what I was looking for, was like, what is the straight path? What is the like guaranteed path? If I wanted to be a surgeon, if I wanted to be a doctor, if I wanted to be a lawyer, there was clearly this really direct route. You just have to like, go through the steps. You have to achieve very highly at each step, but like, it's very clear. The filmmaking career is much less clear, but this seemed like the clearest way to get there. Anyway, I moved to Australia, and with like no film experience and with like an engineering physics degree, I figured that like I was not going to be, a top candidate. They were not going to admit me right away. So I needed to find something to do before I could apply to the film school. And so ultimately I decided, well, what if I try to merge my interests in like science and film? So let's think about like, what does it look like if we take like physics and film and we try to like squish them together into some sort of like thing. And at the University of Sydney, I found this physics education research group. And I said, okay, well, let's create a PhD around how do you make films that actually teach physics. So I tried to smush these things together. And I spent 3.5 years doing this. The other thing was, like, in Australia, it doesn't take as long to get a PhD. So I was like, hey, I can give it up 3 years. I can trade that. So like, I moved to Australia in June 2004, and by July, I was already enrolled in a PhD. So that was kind of crazy. Like, in the School of Physics, studying essentially like education research and making physics films. And it turns out like doing a PhD is hard, and it didn't really satisfy my interest in making films, because the films I was making weren't like great. They were terrible, in fact. And it didn't really satisfy my interest in physics, because I wasn't really studying physics and I wasn't doing physics research. I was studying education research, and like, a little heads up, education research is terrible. Okay, by and large, it sucks. One of the reasons it sucks is because everyone who's doing education research typically has an agenda, and they're out there trying to like, do experiments that kind of like promote their agenda. So like, bias is everywhere, and like all the statistical tricks that you can bring to like make the result that you want, they bring. And it's basically just a battle of ideologies, and it's kind of horrifying in that way. And coming out of physics, where I'm like, things should be objective, and we should have these sort of rigorous protocols, and like everything should be buttoned down, and there should be clear theory, and there should be like a state of the research. None of that existed, and it was just a total mess, which made me feel really at sea and really uneasy and uncomfortable, and it was a battle to like get this thing done. But I got it done, and I was just gonna kind of put it beside me. While I was doing the PhD, I started teaching at a tutoring company in Sydney, and it was actually like, it was called Matrix. It was actually part of the day that I like looked forward to the most, because I would leave my office where I was doing the PhD at like 3 o'clock, go teach some kids by like 4:20, and I would be taking them through all this physics, and like, it wasn't school, and I was kind of their guy, and their didn't have any real behavioral problems. It was just like me talking physics with some students who were fairly bright, if like a little bit undermotivated. So like, I saw my role a little bit like being like their personal training, like what do you call that? Like I was like their personal trainer for physics. Like, they had the textbook, like they could do the lifts if they wanted, but they didn't want to do the lifts. But if I was there, I'd be like, look, here's how we do the lifts. Go 10 more, go. It's like, and that was just like fun for me and fun for them, and it was a good experience. And so at the end of doing my PhD, I was like, okay, so now time to apply to like the film school, Except I still really didn't have any films to show them, and the films I'd made here were crap. So like, things were still a mess. And to make matters worse, at the time, Afters was like, they were moving. So they were like at one campus, and they were going to a different campus, and because of that, they weren't really taking any students that year. So like basically when I finished, they were gone. They weren't ready to take any students. So I was tutoring here, and then I got asked to like come on and be the head of science, and so I did that. And you know what? I found that I really enjoyed it. And as the head of science, and basically there was just my boss above me who was the owner of the whole company, and I got to be like in business for a while. So I was thinking about, you know, how do we grow our student numbers? How do we advertise? So I started like doing Google AdWords for our company. How do we do a database that stores all our student like responses, and how do we take payments and do payment plans, and you know, basically just essentially build and run a business that educates like high school kids as a tutoring company. And so I found that like business was actually super enjoyable, which is something that I didn't imagine when I was a kid. When I was a kid, I thought anyone who wants to go into business or into finance, like they just love money and they don't have any real interests, right? But actually doing it, I found that it was like, there were all these areas of finesse, like how do you get this just right? Like how do you get this part to fit just right with that part? And how do you get processes in place that'll like make everything run smoothly and produce a great end result for all your teachers, for your students, for the people who are doing the marketing. So I really loved my job. And I loved, you know, working with the students and the other teachers, and like it was all good. And at some point, I think my boss, the owner, was like, I want to hire a general manager for this company. And I was like, well, obviously, like I should be the general manager of this company. But he had his eye on someone else who used to be, I think, a student at the tutoring company, but had gone on to like work at a bank and in risk management. He highly respected her, and he was like, no, she's going to come and do this. And then I, like, this forced me into like a real moment of thinking of like, okay, so like, what am I doing here? You know, it forced me to like kind of like wake up. I think I was 27 or 28 years old. And I was like, do I want to be the general manager of this tutoring company in 5 years? Like, is that where I see myself? And like for the enjoyment of the day-to-day, like, because it was very enjoyable day-to-day, like that wasn't my dream. I didn't dream of being like, I'm running a tutoring company. That wasn't the vision for my life. My vision for my life was always like, I want to be making films. I want to be doing like this craft of like putting together these stories and putting them out, having people respond to them, and like, you know, interacting with the world and having impact. But I'd never really gone at that. You see, the whole life plan was sort of around things that kind of like felt right at the time and seemed like good strategic moves, and like, you know. So that's when I decided to quit. Was like, okay, well, like I wouldn't actually even have wanted that anyway. I mean, it was the next thing, which is probably why I wanted it, but I didn't really want that. So I decided to quit working full time. And what was great about this job was like, I cut my hours down to 15 hours a week. So that was a pretty dramatic cut in my hours, but it only cut my pay by about like, I don't know, 35%, because like my teaching hours were so much more valuable. Like I was being paid around $100 an hour when teaching, whereas my management hours or my like working behind the scenes hours were paid at a much lower rate. I mean, if you wanted to break them out, I was salaried, but if you wanted to break it out, like the teaching hours were really the valuable hours. So by cutting down to 15 hours a week, I dramatically increased my free time, so I could actually start making YouTube videos, but I was still able to pay the bills. And so I was like, what kind of wuss would I be? Like, what kind of like coward would one be to like keep going in this job when it's not like the thing that you dream of doing? So it was a real like moment of truth for me. It was a moment of truth. So Veritas, okay? So when I came up with this name Veritasium, it wasn't just about like, you know, okay, so I'm going to make a YouTube channel about science. It was like, it was about going after the truth, like going after the thing that's real for you, and not just like playing it safe and being strategic and all those other things that like, you know, jumping through hoops that like, at the age of 25, I felt kind of like institutionalized. Like the only thing I had known was the inside of a classroom in a way. Like I'd gone from elementary to high school to like university to grad school, and like all of that is so institutional. It's got very little like, you grab things, you do what you want with them, and you make it what you want. You know, you build it into what you want. And that was the big change. So for me, it took until like 27, 28. And then YouTube channel made no money for 2 years. So I was still, I mean, I say making no money, but it wasn't supporting my living. So it was only after 2 years, after 2013, that I could live off the YouTube channel. So basically from 2013 to today, like the YouTube channel has been the main source of income, and that's been my job. Does that answer your question? Is there a follow-up? You guys are thinking about what to do. Is that it?
I mean, so would you say that then, like, your thing of strategy and prioritization is that what carried you throughout all these steps, or then because that was the goal, right? To just prioritize going to grad school, and then these are the steps. But then it took a much windier journey. So like during that course, were you still, like I have my horse blinders on, and I'm just going to pursue this one thing?
Yeah, I mean, like, I think I bring this to bear in most exercises of my life. And I also argue that, like, if you want to get what you want, it's very important to do these things. I don't know if that relates to, like, the rest of this, like, winding saga. But like, I never made a risky decision, really. You know? There are some, like, crazy steps, right? Which, like, the step from here, nuclear safety solutions, no, I'm just going to go to Australia, is a weird step. And it was like, I got on a plane without knowing anyone, without knowing where I was going to go, like, where I was going to sleep my first night. I didn't know. I just got on the plane, went to Australia, and was like, okay, now what do I do? You know, and just figured it out. But it wasn't risky in a way. Like, I had enough money to last me a period of time once I was there. In fact, I got a job working at a Subway in Sydney, like making sandwiches. The minimum wage in Australia is much higher than it is here. So working at Subway, I made $16 an hour back in 2004. Oh my gosh. It's insane. And I was a sandwich artist. You got a Subway for me? That was a good Subway. Weird thing was before, like whenever I went to Subway, I'd get something really healthy. But then once you start making subs for other people, and they're like, oh yeah, well add bacon, make it a double cheese and stuff. You start looking at these subs, and you're like, oh yeah, I'm getting some ideas, and I made some really unhealthy subs for myself. But anyway, yeah. So I think one of my things was like, I'm actually very conservative in terms of like the risks that I'm comfortable taking. I've been very conservative. But I wanted to kind of get towards like a film kind of outcome, but it took me a long time to get there because I was being so sort of conservative with what I was doing. And I never really just said, I'm going to give myself 6 months to just mess around with something and maybe fail at it. When I eventually did do this, you know, I had to say that, okay, I'm going to give myself at least 6 months to sort of mess around on YouTube and just sort of see, is this, like, am I going to get traction? Is this going to go anywhere? And I do think that that's a useful thing to take to your life is like, if you want to experiment with things in your life, it's a good idea to do them, and a good idea to give yourself some time, but not give yourself too much time, so you can just, you know, really flounder and fall apart. You know, you want to focus your energies, but definitely like experimenting, I think, is super smart. And it's still something like I do on the channel, but I think like everyone can sort of embrace that in their own lives a little bit. This idea of like, how do I experiment a little bit and see if like this could work or that could work? Yeah, I definitely think we should do more of that, little experiments, and see sort of what the result is, what the result of the world is. What are you thinking about doing? Do you have plans? Do you want to go to grad school?
I mean, my plan is grad school.
Yeah.
So I'm a senior right now.
Yeah.
So probably going to be a gap year, do some research, and go to grad school.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds like a good strategy. Do you ultimately want to be tenure track faculty? Is that the goal?
That's the plan, yeah.
Yeah. And like, by all means, totally possible. But what is it gonna mean in terms of like, what does that look like for your life? And what are your probabilities? So like, I saw Sean Carroll, who's a prof at Caltech today. He said that if you graduate from a really top tier university in physics, in grad school, you have sort of a 20-25% chance of making it to be tenured faculty. So are you okay with those odds, like being 1 in 4, 1 in 5, depending on where you end up going? And then there's sort of lesser versions of like tenured faculty, which could be like, you know, teaching faculty at some liberal arts college or who knows what. But like there are for sure other options. And then there's always like YouTuber, which is super unlikely. Yeah, no, but I think like, you know, you go for the thing that you want. For me, I thought about like times in my life. So whenever anyone emails me, sometimes they do, to email like ask, like, what do I do with my life? And like, I get it. I was there. I still sometimes feel like I'm there. But like, what do I think about? I think about like, when are you the happiest? Like, when do you feel like, when are you happiest? When are you fulfilled? When do you feel like when do you feel like you've utilized your strengths? Like, when do you feel like you're doing something that like not a lot of other people are really good at doing, or just something that makes you feel like you're working, like you're using some parts of yourself, and then afterwards you feel really good and like you could kind of like do that again, or it's given you like a real kind of bang. Like, frankly, like teaching for me gives me that feeling to a degree. Even like talking to a group like this, I enjoy that. I feel like this is a strength for me. I don't know if it is. Like, maybe I'm spewing crap up here, but like I am enjoying myself. So I hope you're enjoying that as well. But the point is, like, I thought about when am I happiest? I did some plays when I was in high school. I did some Shakespeare in downtown Vancouver, and I loved that. When I was 12, I was Tiny Tim in A Christmas Carol. So this was like, it was a professional production, and I was like, you know, doing musical numbers and stuff like that. And I really enjoyed myself. So I enjoy the act of performance. I enjoy the act of like putting together a film. I enjoy like working with other people. Some like sense of community and like being creative together. Like, I like all of those things. I don't get so much of like the being creative with other people, but I'd love to do that at some point. But anyway, that was for me the things that I was thinking about. What do you love? Struggling with hard physics problems, staring at your board, reading other people's papers, getting angry and yelling at other people. Like, if that is how you feel, then like physics ain't science takes a certain amount of like tedium. There's all these like stereotypes as like the scientist is like, you know, absent-minded or really like antisocial or whatever. But like part of that is borne out in the skills that you need to be a good scientist. Like, you have to kind of be impartial, you have to be doubting, you have to be you know, rigorous and be able to deal with tedium, and like that's part of the day-to-day activity of the thing. Here's the thing, like, I love science, I don't love doing science. So that makes my job the ideal job, right? I get to explore black holes for a week, then explain it to people, and everyone thinks I'm brilliant, right? I'm just telling you what other people have already figured out. But like, I got to learn the science, which was fun. I got to talk about the science, which is fun. You know, like, I got to do all the fun pieces for me, but not the boring pieces, which is like struggling with it for years. You know, writing these arduous papers and, you know, plotting out what a black hole looks like by hand, which is what the guy did in 1979. So, I feel like I found myself in like, this is my sweet spot, you know? But like, what's your sweet spot? That's the thing that each person has to answer for themselves. It's like, when do you feel happiest? When do you feel fulfilled? When do you feel like really good, like you're utilizing your strengths, and like, you know, very few other people have these strengths. Because it's good to be uniquely useful as opposed to just, you know, yeah, I could do that, I could do that, yeah. Yeah?
This is just like a logistical question, but what was it like to emigrate from Canada to Australia? Did you have to get a specific visa, or?
Totally valid question, and I have a maybe disappointing answer for you, which is, so my dad was an engineer. My parents are South African. And they moved to Canada in the 70s because South Africa, political, terrible. They moved to Canada in the 70s, and then my dad got this job at an engineering company. It was like pulp and paper, making paper. And they asked him, he loved to go on site, and there was a site in Australia. So in the early 80s, they moved to Australia. I was born, and they moved back to Canada. So by virtue of just popping out in Australia, I had a passport. So it's funny, I don't know if my parents were subliminally trying to get me to go back to Australia, but when I grew up as a kid, my cover for my duvet, you guys call it a duvet?
Yeah.
Okay, in Australia they call it a doona. Anyway, don't get me started. So the cover for my duvet was an Australian flag. So I don't know if they were like surreptitiously, putting that in my head that like you will go back to Australia, but I did, and I lived there for 11 years, and I loved it. It's a wonderful country. At a certain point, I got to feeling like, okay, I was on the Australian science TV show. The science magazine in Australia asked me to write for them, and like there was basically nothing else. I spoke to like the Australian science teachers, and like where else was there to go? Also, I think they thought my accent sounded a little bit too American, and that was not an asset in Australia. But I feel like it is an asset here, and my audience is like 40% American, so again, another reason to move here. So when I got to, when I got to a certain point in the YouTube channel, then it was like, okay, time to move to the US, which was actually a logistical challenge. It took me at least a year to apply for visas and stuff, and now I'm here on a green card, so. Yep.
Where do you live now? Like, where did you, since moving to Australia? Like, where do you exactly live? Have you been
What's the question? Where do I live?
Like,
I live just up the hill here in LA.
actually?
Yeah. I live like 20 minutes away. My wife is studying here. She's doing her PhD in planetary geology. My kids go to like the daycare just off campus, and Yep.
What do you think is the future of education, like given the access to the internet and especially things like YouTube channels to spread education not outside of institutions like colleges? What do you think education is going to look like in the future?
We'll see, because I could be very wrong, but my suspicion is that this sort of like personal training thing actually seems to be important. So like human-on-human interaction actually seems to be very useful and very beneficial for most people. So I suspect that it's going to look strangely similar to how it does now and how it looked 100 years ago. And I'm not sure that that's a bad thing. It would be great to think that like technology will revolutionize education. But I've made a video about it, and it just doesn't look promising given the data that I've seen. Like with textbooks, you could already kick teachers out. Like you don't need it to be in a video. You could just use it in a book. All right, like you could teach yourself everything from your textbook, except probably you couldn't or probably you wouldn't, and so you don't, and so you come and see someone who actually reads the book to you, kind of. Like, hopefully does it in a way that's more engaging, and that's the beauty of teaching. Yeah.
When you research different topics, at what level do you draw the line? Like, what depth do you draw the line? Okay.
When I feel like I can get away with it. I go to a point that feels like I feel satisfied, and therefore I think I can explain it to someone else in a way that they will feel satisfied. And maybe there's further questions, but you're right, you have to draw the line somewhere. So I try to, draw the line at a point where I feel like, oh, I've taken you to a new place, and there you go.
What's the time frame for your research per video?
It really depends. Like lately I've been pushed by some events. So with the black hole video, I actually got an email from someone in the EHT collaboration like a week before the announcement. And I was vaguely aware of the announcement coming out, but it was only when someone emailed me and was like, hey, are you going to do a video on this? We're on the inside. Hang on, what's that? So then I thought I could get an inside scoop out of them, which I think I couldn't really, but that mobilized me on like, okay, now I need to figure out what I'm doing. But I had a timeline on that. It was like 6 days, but I was obsessed for 6 days. I could barely sleep because I was like thinking about how to explain a black hole for 6 days. So. Sometimes it's not as obsessive as that, but like that, The great thing, I think, great plasma thing I prepared in 2 or 3 days, just because I knew that the paper was coming out, so I wanted to like be on top of it. Yeah, at the back.
So the 2 years where your YouTube video for your YouTube channel wasn't very good.
Yep.
Did you feel like you were working like to the point where entrepreneur works when you're first getting your business up? Like 2 jobs?
Kind of. It was very blue sky. It was very just like, everything was new and everything was like, I'm just going out there trying some things. And I think, like I've talked about this in my video, I think I didn't know how bad I was, but I was really bad. Like for the first couple of years, and you can see because those videos are still there. Like they're not good videos, they're not that interesting. Like I'm not that good at presenting. So it was a learning experience, and I'm glad that I gave myself some room to be, bad and just take some time with it. I think one of the things that made these 2 years sufferable was the fact that like from time to time there was a hit. So like the first video that I think really did well for me on Reddit was like, distance between the Earth and the Moon, representing them as a basketball and a tennis ball, and going out and asking people to like roughly position them as the Earth and Moon are, and realizing that everyone has a sort of a crazy picture in their head with the Earth and Moon like that far apart, where they're really like 30 feet apart or something of that order. So those little successes spurred me along and gave me enough confidence to think like, okay, maybe this could pay off at some point. But there were definitely times like in the first 6 months, I remember when I was like thinking about quitting. And it's good that I had friends around who were like, no, what you're doing is useful. And like I had friends who were teachers who were saying like, no, I'm using your video in my class, like this is good, it's going somewhere, and they were supportive. So but I think like with this idea of like strategy, prioritization, and the other thing I mentioned to you, like experimentation, making little experiments. Like, I can't emphasize that enough. You always have to be doing the experiments and like be willing to change. I could see, so my initial plan for what the channel was going to be was it was going to be like, I'm going to take you from like a level of 0 in science up to a level of like infinity, but like step by step, So let's talk about what is an atom as like level 1, or like that everything's made up of tiny pieces. And like, let's move through to infinity. So my thinking was like, who's my audience? My audience is someone who doesn't really know much about science, but someone who's intelligent, who's interested, and wants to know more about science. Now the problem is, I've just described someone who doesn't exist, okay? Because if you don't know anything about science, chances are you aren't interested in it, and you like don't want to know more about it. And if you do know about it, then you don't want to start at 0. So like, I had picked an audience that like was a very difficult audience to reach. What I found, in fact, was that I did find, obviously there is a tiny sliver of the population who does meet that description, but it's a very tiny sliver. And so you're never going to build a broad-based YouTube channel out of that. I saw people like Minute Physics jump on the scene, and he skyrocketed way ahead of me immediately, because he was making very clever and witty videos about Schrodinger's cat. So I knew immediately, okay, the thing I need to do to improve my strategy with what I'm doing is do higher level physics topics. It became clear to me almost immediately that I needed to do that, and I just couldn't keep trucking out like, what is gravity? What's a force? Like that's not going to get anywhere. So do some experiments with like, okay, what if I did a video about how does a transistor work? I'm trying to think of like early videos that were sort of higher level, but I knew that they were sexier topics because they were more like, now I'm aiming this at like people who are physics interested, or physics students, or like engineer students. So like experiment, and when you get the positive feedback, when you feel that resonance, then move that direction, take that strategy that direction, and then iterate on that. I in fact had someone email me and say like, Derek, I used to love your videos, they were so clear, and like I was learning a lot, and now it's just like all over my head. And I had to write back and be like, yes, I did this intentionally, because although I love educating you, I can't support myself on just educating you. I need to educate a much bigger group of people, or excite a much bigger group of people to make this work. Yes?
Speaking of strategy, do you play chess, and would you like to go to UCLA chess club meeting?
So here's the thing about I don't play chess, and I don't really play games, and I don't really like puzzles. Let me tell you why. Let me tell you why. These things seem to have no purpose. And for me, purpose is very important. If I'm going to agonize over something, I want it to be for a purpose other than just dominating another person, So I don't know, like, or maybe I just suck at chess. Maybe I suck at chess and puzzles, and therefore I've said like, you know what, I'm not going to expend my time on this. But in some way, like that is So I don't play any video games, no computer games, no chess, nothing like that. You know. Yes.
So going back to the 2-year period when your videos were not good.
Yep.
How did you learn so quickly to make them better, and how did you?
2 years? You think that's fast? Like, wow, he turned that around in 2 years. Think about spending every day of your life working on something, and like 2 years later, and you're still sucking at it. Like, I don't know. And I'm not even saying that after 2 years I was great. Like 2 years was really a financial timeline. The videos probably sucked for a lot longer than that. But everything goes in fits and starts, ebbs and flows. I think if you look at almost any YouTuber who's left up their original videos, you find that they start at a place of like energy where it's like it's just too low. It's unrealistically low energy. And then maybe over time they'll like go up, and then maybe they'll get too high, and then there'll be some like control system error here, and then eventually they'll sort of level out. So that's what I seem to see with people in terms of like, at least in terms of performance and stuff, is that like typically your energy is like initially you're like uncomfortable in front of the camera, and so you can see that too stiff, they're not real, and then sometimes they overshoot, and then hopefully eventually they get somewhere that's like, boom, that's my level.
You follow up?
Follow up? Yes, follow up.
Sorry, I meant more like how did you figure out what it was you needed to change in the videos at all?
Well, like I say, it became obvious because of things like minute physics coming up, doing high-level topics, and then I could experiment and start trying some different videos that like had a different topic or different theme, or I was doing things in a different way, feeling things that felt right to me, feeling things that felt right to an audience. And like my first year, I published 63 videos. Like last year, I published 18. So like I've come way down in terms of my output, but hopefully like each video has more thought going into it, and you know, I think I've got better at calling my shots of like, oh, this is going to be a great video, or I can kind of know when something's going to take off. Yeah, I don't know if that answers the question. So at the back in the red.
Oh yes, you said that like for 2 years, like your YouTube channel wasn't supporting itself. What advice would you give for someone who did the same thing and wasn't successful?
What do you mean? After 2 years?
They took a big risk chasing the dream and didn't succeed.
Well, how long have they given it?
Similar time frame?
It's tricky because part of experimentation is about, I want to try something, but then you have to objectively analyze the results. So if you try something a little bit and it doesn't work at all, and then you try it again and it doesn't work at all, and you're like varying it up and never seeing anything that you consider like, oh, there's a response to my system, then that's a bad sign. But if the result of your experiment is that like, okay, the first few experiments didn't go anywhere, but like this experiment is starting to like, I can see a shimmer of hope here, or if I change something here, I think I could amplify on this. So if there's some evidence of like an uptick, then you can modify the experiment and keep going. I'll remind you that like there's a YouTube channel called Mr. Beast now. You guys know about Mr. Beast, okay? Blown up, but he was small on YouTube for many, many, many years before he figured out what was working for him. So the point being that like there's no saying like what length of time is the right like incubator time or how long to stick with it. And you stick with it as long as you feel like sticking with it. If you still feel like it's the core thing that you want to be doing, you keep doing it. But if at some point it gets to like, you know, it feels too much like whacking your head against a wall, then just move off it and try something else. If like you can even think of something else that you'd like to do. That's what I'd recommend. I don't know how you spell. In the white, yes.
Do you yourself watch any other like educational YouTube channels or video essayists?
I do. I'm friends with like Brady Heron, who does a whole bunch of channels, and Henry does Minute Physics, and Destiny does Smarter Every Day, and CGP Grey, and I also watch Nerdwriter. Trying to think who else I check in with. I check in with a variety of like different creators because like we meet each other semi-regularly. So all the Vsauce guys, and so yeah, we're sort of a crew a little bit. Other questions? Yes.
So considering how many different environments you've been in throughout your journey,
yep.
I'm pretty sure at some point, I don't know if this is me being a bad person, but you must have thought of people as like, wow, how is this person so dumb? How do you navigate difficult people?
That is.
Or did you just get out
I feel like there's two different aspects to your question. The whole dumb part of the question is like, I don't know that I found people that I would say are dumb. I mean, like, I had students that I had a hard time getting through to them, but like that just seemed like a challenge to me. So, but like difficult people, are you thinking like bosses or friends or coworkers or?
I mean, I was thinking all of them because you've been in such different environments.
Yeah, I'm trying to think like, what do you do with difficult people? That is yeah, I think like try to work around them. I don't know what the best. Definitely, I mean, like sometimes it's about confrontation. Some people are just jerks, but I find it very difficult to answer this question. It's tough for me to think of someone off the top of my head who I felt like has been difficult to work with. And like for the last 8.5 years of my life, let's be clear, I've been working basically with myself and only myself. So yeah, nothing immediately springs to mind. I'm trying to get some. Yes, gentleman here.
You said you don't like games.
Yeah.
So, how do you entertain yourself?
Yeah, what do you do for fun?
Look, I mean, I've got 2 kids under 2 now. So one of the ways is just like taking care of kids is like an extra full-time job. I guess I get caught in the like scroll like a lot of other people. Twitter, my emails like just blow up every day, and it's like whack-a-mole trying to keep it down. So like Twitter, Facebook. I'm not on Facebook really. So Twitter, Instagram, news. News is like a crazy obsession for me. Like I'm addicted. So I've been like banning news from my phone and stuff like that. And I'm trying to get like my number of hours on my phone down to like, let's say 2 hours a day. I think I'd be happy with, maybe. Yeah.
Are you trying to go back on like your low information diet
Yeah.
like you talked about?
I'm constantly attempting to get onto a low information diet. And I'd recommend a lot of people, I mean, like, I don't know what your information diet's like, but like mine is horrible because I'm just constantly looking for like, what's news, what's happening, I want to know what's going on, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, no, like it really doesn't matter. Like, let's bring it back and let's focus on the things that do matter. Yeah. I don't often find myself like wanting for something, you know. In the last year, I've maybe seen like 1 movie or 2 movies or something. So like, just these days, like free time is at a total premium. So either I'm thinking about work or I'm, you know, dealing with kids or something like that. So my life's totally changed. Yeah.
3 follow-up questions.
3 follow-up questions.
Sorry.
Who said this was allowed?
How many hours per day are you on your phone? What movies did you watch? And this isn't a follow-up, but when did you start wearing a tie with the logo on it? That's
okay.
Can we get one?
Yeah.
Yeah. Possible. So, I think my time on my phone ranges up to 3 hours in the last like 6 months. It's been 3 hours a day at some point. The movie that we watched, I said to my wife, like, I've heard The Favorite is good. I've heard nothing about it, but I've heard it's good. And we walked into the theater and I was like, oh, a period piece, is it? About lesbians? Anyway, so like, I wasn't really happy with that choice of movie, but like, not because of the lesbians or whatever, just because I didn't like the movie. Okay? The thing that I had, who here has seen The Favorite? Okay.
Not gonna watch it.
I don't want to give away any spoilers or anything, but I felt the characters were like hard to relate to, and like I didn't feel like they were like real people, because if you look at their motivations and their actions, I felt like they were totally inconsistent with my sense of like what would a real human do. Like even that character, they seemed inconsistent. So anyway, that was my major problem with that movie. I'm trying to think if we saw another movie. Can't think of any others off the top of my head. We did watch Game of Thrones on Sunday, so.
Nice. Yeah.
And I thought it sucked. Anyway, it wasn't that bad, but it was like, there were parts, but the tie.
Yeah.
This one my mom made for me.
Oh.
This was maybe like, I don't know, 5 years ago or 6 years ago or something. Like, she just took it upon herself to get this embroidered, and I was delighted. And at some point, I actually looked into making them and selling them as merch. It didn't work out, so. One of the funny things is like merch doesn't really bring in that much money, and it's a bunch of hassle, so I can't be bothered. I also don't want more stuff out in the world. I'm constantly trying to throw stuff out. Yes?
So how did you get into the vitamin documentary, and how does that compare to the YouTube process?
Yeah, okay, so Uranium was the first documentary I did, and I did this with an Australian production company called Gene Pool. I'd known the sort of head of the company for a few years. She knew my YouTube channel. She knew my work on the Australian Science TV show. And they had this project on radioactivity. And they sent me a script, and I thought it looked great. And we were traveling around the world, visiting like 10 countries. And we had 40 shoot days, and plus like 30 or 40 travel days. So you're looking at like 80 days of your life, at least. And that's in the production of 2 or 3 hours worth of content on uranium, radioactivity, and radiation. So it is a totally different experience. And the benefits of doing like a documentary is I never have to worry about the camera or the sound. Like, focus is not my problem. So like, even the script, like I'm given lines to say essentially in these documentaries. So like, there's a lot that's like out of my hands, which in a way is nice because it's like I just have to focus on like what am I doing in front of camera. And the downside is like a huge portion of my life got eaten up in that project and then in the Vitamania project. So Vitamania project is the same production company out of Australia who wanted to go on and do something about vitamins. And like I say, the big pluses of like I don't have to worry about the edit, I don't have to worry about the music or the sound or like anything but what I'm doing in front of camera. But the big downside is like I don't have control over what those things end up looking like, what the message really is, like, so double-edged sword. Like ultimately I'm happier now, I think, getting back into YouTube and just doing everything myself and feeling like, I'm in control, I don't have to travel anywhere. Like now I've got a family and a life that I have to be here for. But I think the documentary looks beautiful, so trade-offs. Go on here, yes.
Can you explain what the low information diet was?
Yeah, low information diet is basically just like don't find out anything about what's happening in the world. And the sort of logic behind it is that like if you didn't read the news for a whole week and then you looked at the end, there would be a whole bunch of stuff in the middle that while it was going on would have seemed really important, like, oh, Trump just said he's going to close the border. And then at the end of the week, it's like, Trump didn't close the border. And it's like, all of that didn't matter at all, And so you can move on with your life. And it's like, following the soap opera of the everyday of like what's happening is actually not that interesting, worthwhile, and it's a giant waste of your time. If you're thinking about your strategy and your prioritization, like scrolling Twitter, scrolling Facebook, Instagram, all that sort of stuff is like giant waste of your life when you really, really think about it. I've been really anti-social media for a while, but like especially lately. Yep.
Is there any like strategies that you try to implement to be successful at removing that and reducing that?
You can just delete them off your phone. Like I kind of forgot my Facebook password, so that's one strategy. I don't have Facebook installed on this phone, so like my Facebook usage has been next to nil for like the last couple of years. I don't really get involved with Twitter because I find the mainstream of Twitter, like whoever I follow, like I find it just too overwhelming. But sometimes I look at mentions, and particularly in the last week or two, because my Twitter's been blowing up with the black hole stuff, so I've been sort of on there and monitoring that. Instagram I'm sometimes on, but even then I've sort of cut way down. But I don't know, besides like deleting things off your phone and stuff, like those are definitely strategies you can implement. I am blocking a lot of news sites from my phone. Can't believe how fast the time's going. My goodness. Yes, question here.
Yeah, one question. How do you come up with your video ideas a lot of times? Like, I know there's stuff like the black hole where it happens and it's there, but like, you did a video on like permanent magnets a good bit ago, and I really like that, but
Yeah, it's weird. Like, the topics come from anywhere. I've got a video coming out hopefully on shade balls, because I think, have you guys heard about shade balls? They're in the LA reservoirs. They're like black balls, like this big. In theory, stopping evaporation, but they're also important to stop the formation of bromate. Anyway, so I don't know why that just came up, but It just did, and now it's on my slate. There's 2 videos that I'm thinking about making, and I thought I would pitch to this room and be like, if anyone in here wants to write a script for me, I have 2 video idea topics for you. One of them is white holes. Everyone's talking about black holes. Ooh, we talk about white holes. YouTube genius. Second topic is the one-way speed of light. So I think I'll do a video on this topic regardless. And if no one sends me an amazing script, I will do it myself. But this is kind of the idea that apparently you can't measure the speed of light in only one direction. Like you can't measure it starting here and stopping here and then figure out the speed of light in between. One of the reasons why, like, there's been some sort of plans to try to do this, but it seems like the only way to date that we've been able to measure the speed of light is on a round trip. And the thing that this leaves open is the possibility that maybe the speed of light is different one direction than the other direction. And you think, well, that's ridiculous. Like, obviously it's got to travel the same speed, but the point is, experimentally, we haven't verified it yet. So I think just the whole thing is fascinating. If you tried to do it in a one-directional, beam, your issue would be like you need a clock here and a clock there, and you need to synchronize them. How do you synchronize them? Well, you use a light. Oh gosh. You see the problem. So this is going to be a good topic, I think, and I want to do this one, but I need to figure out how to tell the story. But you've seen like a little bit of my thinking into how to tell that story. Then white holes, I need to figure out how to tell that story too, but I feel like that's maybe easier. I don't know. But maybe it's less exciting. I don't know. Anyway, if anyone wants to attempt to write these, I'm happy to pay you.
How do you like your scripts formatted?
So you saw that I like to work in a presentation format?
Keynote.
Yeah, like Keynote or Google Slides, Like I like to work in a format where I can sort of see. And that way it also, like I can move ideas around if I'm like, I actually need to start with this. The typical thing that people get wrong on YouTube when they start is that they start with like an introduction. So, for example, shade balls. I actually hired someone to help me write a script for shade balls. Let me see if I can find the shade ball script. We can show you something about shade balls. Isn't it fun to say shade balls? That may be one of the reasons why I'm doing this video. Shade ball. Is it? Okay. So this is not a bad script about shade balls, but I think it makes an error with the start. So this was, as I say, this is not written by me. I hired someone to write this for me, which is rare. I'm just experimenting with this because I still feel like I need to, do this. Los Angeles residents are known for their creativity. Actors, artists, and musicians abound in the City of Angels, but turns out that city employees enjoy getting a little creative too. And in 2008, when LA turned their Ivanhoe Reservoir into a giant pit of plastic balls, that was a new one. Anyway, I won't keep reading, but this is a typical rookie YouTuber, right? Nobody wants to watch an introduction, so you don't do the introduction. I'll show you what the first 5 seconds of the video will look like, okay? Spoilers. Ooh, yeah, spoilers. I think this is it. I think this is what it's going to look like. You ready? No, hang on. Not this one. I don't even know if it's this one. Man. I've really built this up, I kept pushing this Casey to help me things. Sorry about that. What? I'm looking for this. Maybe it's in here. I'm looking for this. There's the script. Yes.
Yeah.
The what?
There was an MP4.
Was there an MP4?
Above.
Yeah.
Above.
Yeah.
Where?
Right there.
Shake balls. Okay, this is the first maybe 5 seconds. Yeah. This is the first 5 or so seconds of the video, at least. I think.
Shall not tell. I want to be a shake ball.
And the video might be called Throwing Shake Balls. This is good market research, I like it. Or the other title might be like 96 million shake balls. So I don't know which one's. No, you like or it might just be shade balls. Like throwing shade balls might be too clever.
No.
If I can get my hands on a lot of shade balls and then like throw them in the air and be like
Thumbnail.
See? Right? Then that could work, because then I'm actually throwing the shade balls. Throwing shade balls. Anyway, so this is coming out, but as you see, introduction. Gotta cut them. Further questions? Doesn't have to be about shade balls. Yes, the back.
What kind of editing software do you use?
Final Cut Pro X. The young lady down here.
You said you have 2 kids.
Yes.
Is there anything about your life experience that you might want them to do differently? Any takeaways from what you did with your work or school?
The trickiest thing, I think, as a parent is that, like, I don't have control over them. Like, I can't make them do what I want. And I know that when I was a kid, I was just really self-motivated. So I wanted to do all the things and do all the things really well. I don't know if they're going to want to do that. And that's my biggest issue, is like, what do I do as a parent if they don't want to do the things that I want them to do? What if they want to fritter their life away on Fortnite? You know, what do I do as a parent? Like, so my biggest fear is that they don't like have that internal motivation that I did. I don't know what to do about that. I also hope as a parent that I'm not as crazy strict as my parents, and I give them some leeway to do the things that like they love.
I guess what I meant was that were there any regrets that you had in your life, certain things that you want your kids to
So the problem with alternate histories, right, is that I'm happy where my history ends. So an alternate history I could say is, well, maybe when I was in high school and I said to my dad, no, I want to take a year off, maybe I should have taken that year off. And I should have gone straight into acting or producing or directing or doing something like at that time. And maybe that would have gone great for me. But equally well, maybe that would have gone terribly for me. And I know that the current history has gone well. So it's difficult for me to regret it. You know what I mean? That's the trick. Yep.
Who do you see yourself as a character on Game of Thrones? Without spoilers.
That's
like, obviously I'm Jon Snow. Sorry?
No spoilers.
No spoilers.
Yeah. Get out of here.
Don't you dare.
You guys are all caught up.
Yeah.
What's it like working on your own? How do you get feedback? And like, especially on the internet where everyone's trying to push their own view, how do you fit into it?
In terms of getting feedback, I sometimes send videos to my friends. Not very often. These days I feel like I've got a pretty good sense of like what's a good video and when the video is ready and all that sort of stuff. I could share it with people on Patreon. In terms of like the feedback of the internet, I think you have to have a really thick skin. And maybe part of having a thick skin is like ignoring the internet. Because there's always going to be assholes. So like just ignore them. Like I think, yeah, maybe that's a transition I've made from like trying to fight every troll to be like, nah, you know what, I don't care. Yeah.
Advice on not getting demonetized.
Just do stuff that's like not horrific. I don't know. most of my stuff hasn't been demonetized, so it's just like, you know.
Henry's stuff did get demonetized.
Henry's?
minute physics.
Yeah, what?
He had to call bullets like death pellets.
Oh, okay. Because I called one of mine, bullet block, and it was briefly demonetized, but I appealed and it worked. So I think they're getting better at that appeal process. I can only hope. Yep.
Do you read the comments on your videos ever?
Sometimes, yeah. And sometimes a lot of them, and sometimes a few of them. It just depends on what else is happening in my life. I posted this video a few years ago about climate change. I posted this video called Climate Change is Boring because I was contacted by Al Gore's people and they were like, we want to pay you some money, make a video about climate change. And I'm like, climate change is boring. But I'll make a video, and I told them that. I said, I'll make a video for you called Climate Change is Boring because that's how I honestly feel. Like, who cares about this anymore? Like, it's so, like, but honestly, the science of it is like so stupidly boring, and like the topic itself is so incontrovertible, and the evidence is so clear, and like, I am about novelty. I'm telling you about white holes. Who's talking about white holes this week? Nobody. But me. White holes. The one-way speed of light, that is novel. Climate change, world is slowly getting warmer. Yeah. So I made a video that essentially said climate change is boring. You know, there's like, obviously this is what's up, and everyone knows this was up, but like there's some people with some vested financial interest and saying, well, maybe that's not what's up. And that's what I made my video. And in the comments, I was slaughtered. And I don't know if they were trolls or they were legit, but like some people were like, Derek, we expected more science from you, not just like telling us stories and blah, 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 blah. So it just so happened that week I was feeling sick, and so I was at home, and I was actually in Melbourne. This was in pre-planning for uranium. And so I was there, I was sick, and I was just like going through every single comment. And from that I realized, okay, there's a lot of problems with this whole climate change thing. And that made me do the follow-up called 13 Misconceptions About Climate Change, which were basically a lot of things that I saw in the comments, like, oh, humans make more CO2, or volcanoes emit more CO2 than humans do, or there's more natural emission of CO2 from a lot of sources than from humans. Like, some of these things true, some of them not, but like, let's just disentangle them and let's clear this up. Like, CO2 only causes 1 degree of warming versus the 3 degrees expected. Yes, that's true, but like, it's because of H2O, compounding factors. So anyway, sometimes I read a lot of the comments, and then that ends up in a follow-up video. Yep. Yep.
You were really critical of the education research for being like way too ideologically driven.
Yeah, it's just like it barely deserves to be called research. Like it is barely research in the sense that like physics research is research.
Yeah. So obviously science is, we think very different from that, but like, do you have any challenges of how to make things, anti-ideological? I know you were on Bill Nye, right?
Yeah.
And like when I saw some of those episodes, they were kind of ideologically driven in my point of view. Like, how do you deal with that, or what do you think about all that kind of stuff coming into science?
Well, I mean, there's a different thing between a TV show and science, right? Like, yeah, I agree with you. There was a lot of ideology in a science show, but it's a science show. It's got writers, it's got ideology, and not necessarily everyone, not even Bill, necessarily agreed with everything, but like he was pushed there by anyway. Won't go too much into detail there, but I think that like most of the hard sciences do a pretty decent job of trying to stamp out bias. Even we're seeing it in psychology now, which is softer. We're seeing people try to do replication experiments and try to like put in place better procedures for like announcing what you were going to do first and stating your methods first, so when you actually go to do the analysis, you don't screw around with how you did it to make the results work out. So I see a gradual movement towards making sure our results are more objective and realizing that there is a problem. Like my video, is most published science research wrong, addresses those issues of like p hacking and all those things. But I think like that's become such a big deal that we're moving to improve methods. So yeah, never.
What's your opinion on YouTube videos and IP law?
YouTube videos, IP law?
Intellectual property law.
Yeah, which one? Like the way it happens on YouTube, or what's coming out of Europe, or what do you think?
I don't know, the complicated relationship between like YouTube policies, actual intellectual property law, and like what YouTube creators can get away with.
Oh yeah. I think it's good what YouTube creators can get away with, frankly. Like, I think it's good to have laxer policies, and I hope that over time the policies become more lax. I personally have a setting on my videos whereby I monetize anything. If someone grabs more than 30 seconds of one of my videos, I monetize them. So if YouTube figures out that someone else has uploaded more than 30 seconds of my video, they send me the revenue from that. I can also release them, but like as a default policy, that's my default. So meaning that anyone's welcome to steal like 25 seconds of my video, and I don't care. Yes? Where do you send the script? Good question. I like people thinking about actually doing this, because like this could be big, guys. This could be your big break. Man, you get a credit on Veritasium, get some money, bling, stocks. It is a very surprising, very secretive email address called veritasium@gmail.com. That's the one that finds me. So you can reach me for whatever reason. Not saying I'll respond, but if you have a script, I'll probably respond. Yeah. Question in the back there.
So you said that by now your main source of income is the YouTube channel.
Yeah.
How volatile is it, especially because you mentioned how much the hits appear like randomly, and how does that impact it?
Yeah. So the ad revenue is very variable, can vary by a factor of 3. Typically, so much more of my income these days comes from sponsors, and so that makes me comfortable that like I'm not going to go hungry. So that's one of the keys to having the sponsors is like while I'm getting sponsored offers, let me take these sponsor offers, and if everything goes to crap next month or something, then at least I've got some money to like live off and figure out what to do next with my life. But expecting that I have at least a year more, maybe I could get to a place where I could almost be like retired and be okay. Yeah. Yep.
Would you ever consider going back to film school?
I don't think I would go back and do any more school. Like I feel like you get to a point in your life and it's like that's enough school. If I did something else, I might write a book. I might write a movie. I might try to pitch TV shows. Or I might try to do something longer form. I feel like in the place where I am right now, which is that like not financially desperate. So like as I say, I think I would be comfortable for a period of years with what I've saved. So like I've lived very conservatively, and I'm now in a place where I could not work for years. But what I probably would do instead of not working for years would be if things went to crap on the channel or whatever, I'd take some time and try to make something that I was really proud of. I'd try to put together like a piece of craft to put out in the world that would either be on the YouTube channel or somewhere else. Maybe try to get something into a film festival, or really think about what I want to do next as like a piece of content. Put all my energies into that, and then try to share that with the world. And hopefully that would like, kickstart the engine a little bit again, and maybe make some more money for me, and allow me to keep going. Yeah.
So like, since you're self-employed, how do you stay motivated, right? You don't have like a 9-to-5 job. Like you have to put this all the pressure on yourself. So how do you do that? Like how?
Well, I mean, yeah. I think I get your question, but like, I feel like from day 0, like I was a self-starter. Mm-hmm. Like in grade 5, they gave us the textbook on the first day of class, a math textbook, and they said we're going to be doing the exercises on every other page. So I went home that night and went to every other page, and I just did all of the exercises. Came back to class the next day, and I was like, there, I've done all the math for grade 5. So it's never been an issue for me to get motivated to do the next thing. I mean, I think sometimes you can get stuck in a rut, and that happens to me. Like sometimes I don't feel like getting up and doing anything. And that is a struggle that I think we all just deal with periodically. Like you can get into a funk, and that happens. I don't know how to break yourself out of it. What I have found is useful is connecting with people. When you get into those sort of funk, like rut situations, it's useful to talk to other people and engage with people. I feel like people are often a good antidepressant because it just like gotta bring you out of yourself. You know what? You're not the only person. Yours is not the only brain. There's millions, billions of other people, and engaging with them, connecting with them, gives you perspective maybe on your life. Yeah, that's helpful. Yes.
My question is, so, like, as you see on the board, earlier in your life, there was a lot of change, and then now recently, like, you have the YouTube, and you're kind of been doing that for a while, so what was it like going from a life whereas, like, when you're younger, everything's really changing, and it's, like, really interesting, how do you, like, you're doing, like, one thing for a while.
Now you're being boring. I gotta say that, like, even though I'm characterizing my current existence as pretty stable, it is still, like, strangely busy.
Okay.
Like, last year, I was still, like, we went to Australia for the tour and launch of Vitamania, and what else did I do? I did a whole bunch of renovations on the house. Anytime I do renovations, like, my productivity on YouTube drops. So, like, I can look at my graph and be like, renovation, baby. Like, you can see it in terms of, like, videos not coming up. So I feel like I am just getting into stability, and frankly, my first experiences of stability are glorious. Even with the semi-stability that I've had this, like, in the last 90 days, I've published 9 videos on YouTube. Which is, like, way more productivity than I've ever had, for a long time. And a lot of that comes down to the fact that it's been stable. But another thing comes down to the fact that I've had deadlines. I've had deadlines for brands, had deadlines for, like, science research being announced, the black hole stuff. It's coming out. Like, I need to get it done for that. And I've stressed myself to, like, here. The crazy thing about the black hole video was the press conference was Wednesday morning at 6 a.m. And all of Tuesday, I was planning, so, I released a video Tuesday morning, the explanation video with the paper and whatever. And so I'd been working over the weekend on that into all the way through Monday, released it on Tuesday, was barely sleeping, was, like, planning on Tuesday to get going on the next video that was going to come out Wednesday and to time with the video. And I don't know what happened Tuesday, but by, like, Tuesday at 9 p.m., I was, like, sitting down at my computer ready to, like, start editing together something so that I wouldn't have such a stress in the morning. And the power went out. And it was so windy, and I'm up the hill here, and our power went out at about 9 o'clock. And so I was like, I cannot do anything. And power came back on, I think, probably around 1 or 2 in the morning. I set my alarm for 4:30 a.m. So up at 4:30, prepping stuff. Then the press conference happened at 6. I got the files, like, right away. And then, from, like, 7, 8, 9, I was, like, madly editing, throwing the thing together, because I knew everyone's going to have essentially the same story on the same day. I don't know, I don't know if this is useful, but it's like, there was definitely times there when I was like, maybe I'm just out, Like, I put up a video yesterday, like, I don't need to do this. But, like, I still thought it was a good investment of my time. And it was, like, the number one thing I should be doing. And the channel has grown by, like, 100,000 subscribers, basically from that black hole video, or the 2 videos. So, totally worth it. Channel's now at its most watched, most watch time, most views in the last 30 days than it's ever been. A lot of it because of that, but also because of other things like great videos and some of the other bits and pieces recently that have done well. Yep.
When you were just getting started, how were people finding out about your videos? Like, did you put a lot into advertising, or did people just see you in their recommendeds, or what?
I was begging people on Facebook, like my friends. I was begging people, like, my friends and family, please watch what I'm doing. And I was not having much luck. If a video did 100 views, that was amazing. And I remember starting to do the calculation of, like, okay, hang on. So if 1,000 views is worth $2, and I'm getting 100 views a video, how many videos do I have to put out a year? And it was just like, the math just didn't make any sense. It was like, there's no way this is ever going anywhere. The only time when you got a glimmer of hope was when it went on Reddit, and it blew up on Reddit, and I got 500,000 views in 2 weeks. And then I was like, oh my God, this is going somewhere. Then the following week, put up a video, maybe 500 views. So it was like, it did not, really take off. It was one of those things where it was like this constant, steady, slow climb. By the time I finished my first year, I had 17,000 subscribers. 17,000, and they were those people who were, like, willing to come with me from 0 to infinity. They were a hard group to find, and then I kind of abandoned them, and I moved on to people more like yourselves, who are just, like, really science interested, science enthusiastic. When you see it, you're going to share it with your friends, and you're like, you guys are into it because you want to learn it, and then you want deeper stuff than anyone else is going to give you. And that's, like, one of the key brand things of Veritasium. I hate to say brand things. It's like my promise to my audience is like, if you come and see a video, you're gonna walk away knowing something you didn't know before, and hopefully that thing will be cool enough that it'll make you look cool in front of your friends. Like that's almost what I'm selling, is like social status. In that, like, if you get this, then you can like show off to your friends. Yeah.
Did you upload your own videos on Reddit?
Sometimes. I'm trying to think whether it happened, whether it did the first time. I mean, I very quickly stopped doing it just because I was like, I don't want to play the game too much. And like, at a certain point, your audience gets to be big enough that like, probably someone from your audience is going to do it. So like, I don't really, I haven't uploaded anything to Reddit in like the last 7 years, let's say. Yep.
What are some of your short-term and long-term goals?
It's a good question. I mean, the big long-term goal for me is financial stability of a sort that, like, as I say, I could retire. So I'd love to get to that place where it's like, you know what? This video could get 5 views or it could get 5 million views. But either way, like, it doesn't make a difference to me. So I'd love to get to that point. In the short term, like I've got a partner manager at YouTube, and she tells me how many minutes watched I need to get this year. And we've agreed on 400 million minutes. Though recently I've been wondering whether it would be possible to get to 1 billion minutes. Probably if I worked my butt off, I might be able to get there. So recently I've been wondering if maybe 180 million views this year and 1 billion view minutes is possible. I think it might be possible, but if I work my butt off. And I don't know whether I'm going to do that. Because like I say, I have been working my butt off for the last couple of weeks, and it's kind of tiring. So, yeah.
Yeah, I do agree with that. Like, each video I come out, like, learning something, and, like, I can tell my friends about it. Like, I was in Guatemala, and we saw, like, the butterflies you talked about, and I was like, those are, like, little holes. That's not, like, the actual color. And that was really cool. And then every time we'd hear a siren, I'd be like, oh, it's actually the Doppler effect. And my friends would be like, shut the fuck up, James.
Making people happier every day. Yeah.
So you mentioned your family quite a bit in this past hour.
Yeah.
When did you decide that they became a priority in your life?
Like, as soon as you have a kid, I think you need to, like, all the equations change. All the prioritizations change. All the strategy changes. Especially because my wife would kick my ass if I just, like, I can't just take off for a week. Plus, I mean, I can, but, like, you have to think about, like, how are you going to plan that now? Especially with 2 kids. With one, it was bad enough when I went off and did Vitamania. And, you know, we had one young kid and she just had to look after him. Now we got to do 2, like, bedtime routines. Like, all of this is a challenge. Like, right now, bedtime routine is actually going to be a challenge for me this evening because, like, they're probably getting towards bath time about now. So, but it's fine. I told my wife, and, like, she knows that tonight I'm here just doing this. But hopefully I'll get home in time to, like, I don't know, help out with at least one of them, you know. So yeah, family is like a whole new chapter of life, and it's, I think of it like a new PhD. You know, if anyone's like, you know, what's it like to have kids? It's like the amount of learning that you go through, the learning curve that you're in, it's like as steep as a PhD. And in terms of the perspective it gives you on what it is to be a human, I'd say it's a new dimension. It's like getting to relive your childhood, but now from the other side. It's like, what did your parents go through when they raised you? You guys have no idea. Sorry?
Can you empathize with them at this point in their life?
Empathize with the kids?
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. And I can empathize with my parents. It's like I say, like I feel like I'm stepping into the same relationship, but on the other side. And it's strangely beautiful. You know? It's strangely beautiful to think about, like, looking at this creature who is essentially, you know, at least half you genetically, but totally not you. But, like, kind of you. It's kind of like you're raising yourself. And now you're getting a chance to make your own mistakes in your own kind of rear. You know what I mean? It's crazy beautiful that, like, we don't have a consciousness, at least yet, that exists forever. But we do have, like, a sequential consciousness where we shape the consciousness of the next one. I don't know. It blows me away. It's totally, I would not have expected this going in. But it's all sorts of crazy things where you're talking about a word to them, or like you're using a word with them. and then you realize the origins of that word. Because, like, you just use it all the time, you never think about it, but, like, when you're trying to explain it to them, you know, you see it through their eyes a little bit, and it's like you see the world again, anew, and it's weird. Yeah?
Have you ever considered making, like, branching out or making a second channel for maybe a wider variety of topics, such as the beauty of child rearing?
Yeah. So I do have a second channel, to Veritasium. I just don't put very much on it. Definitely is a place where one might discuss such things. Yeah.
What happened to Scienceum?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Scienceum was started with a grant from Google, so like I was contractually obligated to make 4 videos. I made 4 videos. And then I was realizing that, like, you know, just the way the algorithm was going and stuff like that made no sense, like, because I was ending up putting so much effort into those videos anyway, it was like they may as well just be on Veritasium. So, like, why am I putting them over here? So I put them on Veritasium, and then sometime later I thought, okay, maybe I can revive this. Anyway, it's constantly this battle of, like, I want to be able to do more things, but when I'm the bottleneck for every step of the way, like, I'm the bottleneck of research writing and of shooting and of editing. What?
Hire us.
The problem has always been trying to find people who are good, like really good, like really, really, really good. I hired this lady, Casey, to write me a script a while back on, the title was Empty Environmental Gestures. So I asked her to investigate things like straws at Starbucks. Should we really be getting rid of all the straws? Is that actually beneficial, or is it just, you know, inconvenient, you know? Or like, what about plastic bags versus paper bags? Like, is it really better to do the paper bags? Or are they heavier and they end up like taking more space on the trucks and like whatever? I wanted it all like quantitatively crunched in a way that like I could, you know. And she brought up the idea of organic food versus regular foods. I said, fine, whatever. Just we're making this video and you write me the script. And she wrote me a script, and it was like, okay. And by that I mean it didn't have a lot of quantitative grunt behind it. It didn't have a really airtight structure to it where I could really like feel like boom, 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 boom. And that weekend, Kurzgesagt launched their organic food versus regular food. The weekend after I got her script. And I sent the link to her and I was like, look, this is the way you need to do it. Like freaking airtight. And I said, this script is not good enough. I'm going to pay you for it anyway, but I'm never going to use it because it is not the most amazing thing on this topic ever. Do you see what I mean? The bar is high. White ball. One-way speed of light. The bar is high, but if you clear it, that is the glory of YouTube that awaits. You see? Like, sometimes I don't clear the bar either, which is why I have some crap videos. But, like, the goal is always to clear the bar. And I get to be the person who stands at the gate and says, no, this will not pass. Yes?
So how much do you end up paying her, and how much will
$600, and I got nothing out of it. But maybe I did get something out of it. Maybe I got her to learn that, like, this cannot just be an average piece of writing. It cannot be a good piece of writing. It cannot be a great piece of writing. It has to be an excellent piece of writing, such that someone will look at this and be like, whoa, mind blown, you know? You don't blow people's minds with like, you know, so organic food, like sometimes they use less pesticide. It's like, no! It just won't cut it. It has to be numerical. It has to be quantitative. It has to be power-packed. It needs to have this structure that is just rip solid. You know what I mean? Anyway. Yeah.
How do you balance creating entertaining content and instructive content? Or do you think the two are completely related?
Well, if you have a look at the black holes video, the one I did last week, I don't know how entertaining that was. Maybe it wasn't. The one with the paper. People seem to love it. So the thing I need to hit, the thing like #1 priority is like when you're watching the video, you've got to have that feeling like, oh, I get it. You know, if I can get you there, then that's the thing that counts. Hopefully, I can get you there in an entertaining way. And part of being entertaining involves cutting all the crap, right? So instead of saying, people in LA are, you know, known for their creativity, but one day, you know, it's like, no, here are freaking shade balls. They're dumping 26 million shade balls into this reservoir. Why are they doing it? Well, #1, they say it reduces evaporation, but how does that work? I mean, they're black. Black absorbs sunlight, so they're going to get hot. They're going to cause more water to evaporate. How does this work? Well, turns out that the way they get hot, they only rise up to a temperature of 85 degrees Fahrenheit, and that causes an increase in evaporation of 2%. But they're meanwhile covering an additional 86% of the surface, hence the evaporation is only 14%, and therefore, and I'm just making all of this up, but see where we can go. Yep.
So how do you find that your skills you learned in engineering and physics applied to the business world?
Say again?
How do you find your skills in engineering and physics, how would you evaluate the way that they apply to business as opposed to like working as a scientist or engineer?
Yeah, I don't know. I was almost going to say not at all. I mean, like, I love that I have a degree in physics because it helps me understand everything I need to understand to now do stuff on YouTube. It's useful to have skills like calculus, super useful. The strangest subject that like has come back to be like useful everywhere I go is English. Like being able to write well and not like a douche, right? So important to be able to write clearly and concisely and like meticulously. That skill, so useful. It's as useful as the skills in math to be able to understand probability, statistics and calculus. And physics, of course, is fundamental to understanding basically everything. So super useful. But when it comes to like running a business, I don't know that there's a lot of transfer there. Besides forcing you to be analytical, forcing you to like, maybe take an experimental approach, look for data, all those sorts of things. But I really think it's a different, business is a different thing, but it's kind of commonsensical. Yeah. Yep.
So, in reference to that question, what about like the problem-solving skills you learn?
Say again? Problem-solving skills?
Yeah.
I don't know that it's transferable. And I was thinking about making a video about this. Just this idea that like, it's a popular thing to say like, I want to teach my students how to think. Right? That's a great line. It's great for educators to stand up and say like, I'm not teaching my students physics, I'm teaching them problem solving that they can take out to the world and solve any problem. It's like, it sounds wonderful. It's bullshit, okay? As far as I can tell. And the reason is, like, it's very difficult to find examples of transfer. So, like, chess players. Are chess players better in marriage than non-chess players? No. Sorry? Are they better? Are chess players better physicists, or are physicists better chess players? No, but chess players are better chess players. You know what I mean? Like, what seems to be the defining feature of a chess player is that they've seen a lot of chessboards. What seems to be the defining feature of a physicist is that they've seen a lot of physics problems. So, transfer is a very, very difficult thing to get, even though we feel like we're a physicist, we know everything, and everything transfers. I mean, that's another hallmark of a physicist. Now that I'm a physicist, I know everything. Oh, look at your field. No, I can fix that. Trivial. Yeah. Very good. Yeah.
Can we take a photo with you?
Sure.
We can switch seats and I'll take a photo from there.
Sure.
Okay, cool.
Wait, Bob, you want me in the photo?
I'll take a selfie. after.
Oh, you're smart. I wish I was as smart as her.
I would love to do lots of selfies, but unfortunately, given the time, I think I might have to just escape from here. But I will come in and do the group photo.
Go towards the middle of the room. And there are lots of spaces around you.